The cool thing about going to these littler stores, as opposed to going to some big corporate thing, is that, like you were saying, you find what did you say? You find retail strategy.
Yeah, retail strategy is really fascinating. How do you lay things out? How do you make it appealing and keep people coming back versus what other people are doing?
The cool thing about that is that when you go to these small stores, it really is strategy. There's not some dude that went to college for, I don't know, 4 semesters that never worked in the store itself who says, well, we're going to lay out everything, and before you know it, you have people across the nation desperately trying to shove these little keepers into the DVD slots, and they didn't incorporate enough space for the keepers, but they require them anyway. So
yeah, all these business strategies, these business theories that aren't really based on anything practical. Where it's like, well, yeah, in theory, if the laws of physics work differently, then this would work fine. But go out and work in the real world and work there for 5 minutes. And you'll know that that won't work. I mean, sometimes it's you just can't lay a store out like that practically, and sometimes it's people don't respond to things you think they do because you're not because you're not learning about the social aspects of it. If you're not actually there,
which I mean, I don't quite understand. Like that's why it's fascinating. I mean,
yeah.
That's the thing that keeps it interesting, because then you have the store owner that's involved, not micromanaging, but involved.
Yeah.
And saying, well, these things should go here because this is our big seller, because obviously he's the one that knows. But you go to one of these massive chain stores, not to say that there's one of those for comics, but you go to a massive chain store, and then you have what I feel like is micromanagement, because I feel like your store manager, your assistant managers ought to be able to say, this is how we're going to lay out that section. But with somebody that's above pulling the strings, it takes away that essential ability. It seems like everybody incorporated is just problem solvers for what the people incorporate do.
Yeah, they're all just trying to fit triangles into square pegs.
Where it's more of a natural development when you have the store owners who can manage their own business.
Yeah, it's learning through experience. It's experienced based instead of just sitting in the classroom.
Brandon, hurry up. I want to take my vitamins.
But yeah, that's the thing. Is that, like, it used to be that that kind of business, more of it was just you get hired and you learn as you go, and now it's like, in order to run a place or own a place or something, you're supposed to have like place degrees and stuff. And I don't mean to belittle it like it's not hard, because it is hard, but you learn all that by doing it.
I mean, I feel like that's one of the cool things about having a small business, is that the communication is limited. Not to say that you don't have the appropriate amount of communication. I mean, the amount that's necessary is more limited. Because like I was saying, with these people that are trying to fit these safekeepers into these slots, or they're trying to fit a product that is just slightly oblong into a spot that they only allotted 4 blocks for. Well, this doesn't work. The advantage is that instead of having somebody create this design with all of the numbers and whatnot, and somebody said, well, we need to have these products here, and then somebody else says, well, they need to be in safekeepers because of how much they cost, and then somebody doesn't tell somebody else, then you have a problem that's nationwide that nobody decides to correct because it'd be too expensive. You have one guy in his small staff who says, this doesn't work. Well, how do we fix it? Problem solved. Let's move things over a little bit. Let's have some shelves that we have a little space on that we can do this with. I mean, that was one of the cool things about Dean, was that he had all of his new issues and his recent back issues displayed face out. Why? Because that's where he gets his money. But, well, not all of it, but a good percentage.
Yeah.
But then all of his trades and stuff are set up like you would see at a
library.
At a library. So it's browsable, but it's not in your face. And that's I think that's smart, and it's all in a Nexus little area. So if you wanted your bookstore, you can go there.
Don't you also think that one of the big differences between owning your own business and being corporate is when you're corporate, you can be selling anything. Mm-hmm. Like, it doesn't matter what the product is, it's just we've got to strategize to figure out how to sell it. Whereas if you own your own business, you probably care about the thing that you're actually selling. So I don't know that necessarily equates to a success, but it equates to a successful store in that I more enjoy going there. I want to go to a store run by people who like the product too. You know,
it's a more pleasant atmosphere because, you know, at the end of the day, maybe some love or at least consideration, even if it's a poorly laid out store, even there's some consideration that this person said this is the way I like it and this is how it works for me, as opposed to this is the way they want it and I'm going to try to make it work, but my hands are tied.
That's why the big corporations with retail that work the best to me are the ones where at least the employees know something, you know, about the product they care. So today is Wednesday, and it's Wednesday, yeah? Yeah, it's Wednesday. This is day 3 of the road trip, and today we're going to The Source in Roseville, Minnesota. Yesterday, we were in a town in Iowa, Sioux City, Iowa, at Acme Comics, and I keep forgetting Sioux City, Iowa, Acme Comics.
I didn't get any root beer.
And what did you think of that story, man?
I thought it was a wonderful story. I thought it was appropriately sized, appropriate usage of the store. I mean, I think that those guys really know how to develop a community, and I feel like that's really what's helping them along with their store, these business over however many years they've been open. I think they said since '95.
Yeah.
Because those guys, they seem to know everyone in the community, and it seems like they all want to help out. It seems like it's kind of a staple of Sioux City, and I mean, I think that's in large part due to their just trying to be involved in that community and trying to be involved in even the national community with their conventions.
Well, it seems like you have to do that in order to make something work in a town that size.
Yeah, which, I mean, so much of the time, I mean, when we got into this thing, I kind of thought that it was going to be about how you set up your store and how you market your store. But I mean, I guess this is marketing, but I mean, it's interesting that you can consider the comic reading community kind of a community, right? Mm-hmm. Because that's what I thought was so cool about it, was these guys are truly involved. Now you have some people that say, you know, they want to sell the product based on the product, like Astro Kitty.
Yeah.
And then you have Dean, Krypton Comics in Omaha, who's trying to sell the product based on his layout of his store, and so he's very aware of what sells and where. And not to say that these guys aren't, but I mean, there's no reason to do 40 cons a year if you're not trying to build some kind of base, if you're not trying to build some kind of community and keep your name out there.
Well, and the approach here that I think is really interesting is there's a lot of selling stuff that they like a lot, and then getting people on board with it. I mean, it's not like they're not selling things to people also based on what they like. But I mean, you know, they've got this giant Doctor Who thing. It's because they're huge into Doctor Who.
Which I mean, this is the time to do it now.
Yeah, they wouldn't be that big with that, of course, if it wasn't hugely popular. But they're playing to their interests, and so you look at their store and you see a lot of Firefly, you see a lot of Doctor Who, you see a lot of fantasy stuff because she's huge into fantasy, and they take their interests and they get people into their interests. And then they fill out with other stuff that maybe they're not huge into, but people are looking for, and that's a really interesting approach. And again, makes a lot of sense for a town that size. I think they probably have been managing over a long time to bring people into their store and get them hooked who wouldn't have gone there otherwise, or wouldn't have gone there or went there for like a couple of things, or like one thing, but then they got them hooked on something else, you know. So they get people into Game of Thrones or whatever it is, and then because they like it a lot and they're passionate about it and it seems cool, and then they keep people. So it's almost like they're creating fans of things.
Yeah, you know, that's kind of, it seems like from what they said, that's kind of how their relationship even unfolded. Like, he was big into comic books since he was a kid, right? And then she wasn't necessarily opposed to them, but she was into other things that were of the geeky realm.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
So they kind of came together, and it was almost like a comic book store was a means to an end to have kind of this massive culture, like pop culture store.
Well, I thought it was fascinating how the comic book shop idea was vital for their getting married in the first place.
Yeah.
That was a huge part of their of their initial getting together. She said, I'm trying to make this career, and I'll marry you if we can open a comic book shop. That's fascinating. They remind me a little bit of me and Sarah.
Yeah, that's. I mean, I think that's what's that almost just reinforces this idea of how much this is tied into like human relations. Because I mean, what is a community, right? It's a group of people relating to one another in some way or another,
right?
And be it through work, friendship, but with those two, it's work and friendship. I mean, even their kid, it's work and family. And these guys, they've developed a life that is revolving around the store, and they seem to be pretty darn happy with it.
They do, yeah.
And I mean, I don't feel like you can separate their marriage from this store.
No, and he would talk.
Not to say it wouldn't survive without the store. I'm just saying.
Kevin talked to me about how they're never home. They barely leave their house, and they don't seem to. They seem to own that. I mean, he said they're kind of using their house as a lot of storage, and they go there, but they're in that store all the time, and but they seem to be perfectly content with what's going on. I mean, you can tell they work hard.
Yeah,
they work dog hard.
They do. I mean, they talked about. No details, but they talked about a family crisis at one point and having to divide who gets the store and when, and they had to change their hours around. I mean, they were telling me that I thought it was kind of charming. She was telling me how they had to change their hours around to these odd hours, and they were normal hours. I said, you realize that you're still open longer than many comic book stores I've been to?
Yeah.
And she said, well, yeah, but the customers were so nice. They just accepted it, and they stayed with us. And they even had a customer who was going through the same thing, that they could help each other through it. And I went, oh my goodness. That's... Every time they brought up something, it was about how to be involved with your customers. It's not just a store. It's kind of like a nexus for, not necessarily socializing, but it's a nexus
it is that too,
for human contact.
Yeah, well, and there's this kind of camaraderie and bond that forms, and you feel almost like you're providing a public service.
And it's interesting.
It's like if we weren't here, you wouldn't be able to not only get this stuff locally, but you also wouldn't be able to have this kind of discourse.
And it's interesting considering that comic books have always been kind of considered like isolation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because so many geeks.
That's the stereotype, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the stereotype. I mean, a lot of us are just considered to be either recluses or very private people. Which I mean, not to say that none of us are. Not to say that many of us are.
Or socially awkward.
But I mean, even people that are socially awkward need to have human contact somewhere.
Well, and that's a good start to get people less socially awkward.
So people,
that's something most of us can get over.
People come into these stores and then they chat with other people about whatever it is. I mean, people get together and talk about a football game, right? Why not about comics? And this is what this store is really affording people to do, is come together.
Yeah, it's neat. Do you? How did you think? How did you feel about that layout compared to the other stores we've been to so far? It's pretty packed in. There's a lot of stuff in that store.
Which I feel like there should be, or maybe there is, two minds of how a comic book store should look, or how a store should look even. Because I feel like if you go into a regular store, you want things evenly displayed. You want a lot of neutral space. You don't want to have to look up to see anything. But in a comic book store, considering you can carry much more stock than what you have room for, because there's quite a lot out there. We're talking about pop culture. So we're not talking about some designer who's sending clothes out to some store to be sold.
Yeah.
So because with those things, I mean, those massive corporate places, you have the ability to use your space to a lesser degree, but you have the ability to afford yourself neutral space. But in a comic book store, especially this one, they used everything.
Yeah.
Every space, every inch had something on it that was either for decoration or that was available to purchase, mostly available to purchase. And in fact, they even had their awards, which I thought this was really interesting. I even praised them for it. They had their awards sitting out in one of the cases with other things to buy. And they just had a not-for-sale shelf and then a couple shelves below it that were for sale.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really interesting. I thought that was... These guys are using their space well. I mean, I don't feel like I'm a bull in a china closet when I'm walking around in there, but there's not much else room. There's not much extra room.
Not a lot of room. The aisles are pretty narrow, but I feel like it's organized. It's not, and I was even talking to Kevin about this. I said, it's really too bad you don't have a little bit more space. And he said, yeah, I wish we did. We're doing the best with what we have. And I do think that they have. I think I buy into, at least for them, because again, different people, right? Like different places, different sizes of stores, and also different kinds of towns. You're gonna need different kinds of a business philosophy, but to certain degrees, or not philosophy, but at least just like layout. Where do you put stuff for the clientele we have and the kind of clientele we're likely to have here? But anyway, they have this idea there of, let's not have anything in the back room. Let's have everything we have out. And
I like that idea.
But if you don't have enough space, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
I mean, you have to store stuff. And obviously, they don't have everything. They don't have all of their stock out. They have a bunch of stuff stored away because they do conventions and things. But I think that they're trying to have representation of kind of everything that they would sell. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I've always kind of felt like if it's not on the floor, it's not moving.
Right.
So, and I understand that you would have to rotate out your stock, otherwise you just have to wait for things to be sold, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's bad form to have something sitting in the scene. I don't get the sense that they do this. That store looks like they move things around a lot to me. I don't think that they just keep everything all the time. I mean, I'd love to come back in 6 months and see if anything's moved around. But I say that because they're smart enough to know that. I mean, I've been in the flea market business, and I know that if you have a booth that's there, if you have all your stuff organized in a certain way in a booth, and you don't move things around in a month, then somebody's going to come back that would have bought something that won't, because they know where everything is. But if you move stuff around, they're going to see something they didn't notice last time because it's in a different place, and you have to do that.
Yeah. And
I'm sure that they do that. But I get the sense about that story that it's like, let's just get everything out there. Let's have it all there. And so I don't know. You'd have to move stuff around, and people would come back and be like,
And they did say that they have a back room that was just incredibly full at the time,
right?
Which we didn't go look at. Why? Because we tried to have some respect, but
right.
But yeah.
What they reminded me of most, and I think a lot of the reason that I feel like I really resonated with that family is because it was a family business, like you said, and it reminded me a lot of, as I just mentioned, my dad and the flea markets that he owned when I was a kid. And it was the same sort of thing. The whole family pitched in, and we barely made it, but we loved it. And I don't think they're barely making it. But they do have to do it all the time. Yeah. You know what I mean? This is not an easy business to make a living in, and there's a reason they're open 7 days. And I mean,
it's a heck of a commitment.
Yeah,
They said they're there 7 days a week.
They're there 7 days a week.
Unless they're going to a con, and then they said they have volunteer staff. So.
And I mean, unless they just, and I don't think this is it, unless they just love it so much, they've got to be open 7 days. I really feel like that they probably, in order to keep up everything, they've probably got to be open. I mean, and I don't know, I didn't talk to him about that, but my dad had that. My dad opened a flea market that he at first called 6 days a week, and he had to change the name of the store because he couldn't afford to only stay open 6 days. He had to open that 7th day. Yeah, and so I don't know. It's just like I was reminded by a lot of things like that. We lived in the floor above the flea market for a while, It was cool, and I loved it, But I mean, like, my dad had a flea market, and then it was like 3,000 square feet. It was enormous, and then above it, he had this huge area and we picked a couple rooms up there, and we lived up there, and. They don't do that, but they're at their store all the time, and I was reminded of all of that, and of the kind of commitment it is, and that it's as much of a lifestyle as it is a career.
Yeah, I like the idea. This whole, it's your own business. It's a small business, and you have control over everything. So
and that's a lot of why you do it, right? I mean, just to not have to work for someone else, just to have that control and do it your way and get to do it yourself is probably worth the difficulty
and having all this control
and the financial stress that it may bring. I mean, again, I don't know what I'm not going to know what these people's finances are like unless they tell me. But I'm just saying that like nobody's getting rich off this business.
Yeah, I mean. I don't know if they said this stuff on camera, but they said something to the effect of, look, we don't get to go out and hang out with our friends, but we have these other experiences.
Yeah, they did talk about that. Mm-hmm.
So, there's give and take with everything.
That's right.
It's hard to run this business, but you know what? It's worth running this business for the following reasons. Blah blah.
That's the sacrifice they make to get to do all the stuff that hardly anybody else ever gets to do. And I thought hard about that. I thought, yeah, I would do it too. I would do it with what we're talking about. You and I being the kind of fans that we are of things. If it meant getting to spend all this time like hobnobbing with celebrities and going to the Eisner Awards and all that kind of stuff, yeah, I'd probably do it too.
Yeah, I mean, long car drives. They said a 27-hour straight trip. That's just ridiculous.
Wow.
I wouldn't
27 hours?
Yeah.
I didn't hear that. Going from where to where?
Someplace in Florida. Actually, I don't know. I'm either thinking it's in Florida or it's MegaCon or it's both.
No, I don't know.
I've never been to MegaCon.
Yeah,
but it sounds big. It sounds mega big.
I'm in disguise. Do not tell Captain Logan that I have taken over Vince for the week. He must know nothing.
Hi, Cap.
Oh, hey, Vince.
How you doing, buddy?
Yeah, how are you doing?
Did you plug after me? I believe he is entirely fooled. Just in case you did not get that, I believe he is entirely fooled.
Hi, Vince.
Hey, Cap.
How you doing?
We're shaking, bud.
Hey, how's it going?
I am infiltrating this trip. I will destroy Captain Logan, Dan, and Brandon. They will never see it coming. Isn't that right, Brandon?
You know what you remind me of right now? You remind me of the chipmunk. The dun dun dun.
I used to have a friend that wore a trench coat everywhere. Scratch that. Hey, Captain.
Good morning, everybody. It's Friday, and we are in Ames, Iowa, and we are about to head over to
Mrs. Iowa. Ames, Miss.
We're about to head over to Mayhem Comics for a shoot this morning. We have been to 4 stores in the trip so far, 5 total, including Astro Kitty, and it's been quite the trip. I'm still waking up because it's early, and I drank too much caffeine yesterday. But yesterday was really fun. We did limited edition. We got to go to the barbershop / comic book store, which was one of the most unique experiences I have ever had. And then we got to go to the Field of Dreams, which was almost equally as much fun. And then we, last night, went and saw my Uncle Steve and my Aunt Shauna and my brother Wilkin.
Terrifically nice people.
We all hang out with them. That was a lot of fun.
Good people, first class people.
Vince,
the thing that I think immediately jumped out to me about limited edition was upon entering, like you don't even really need to be there for very long, but upon entering, you're a friend. Like you
You were entirely welcome. Come in, look around, and it wasn't just that, hi, come in, please look at our store, ask us if you need assistance, please. We'll get back to you later. But it was, hey man, how you doing? What's going on? And it was lots of fun because
they got their own world going on in there.
It's like an entirely separate beast from the outside world. You just walk in, it's like a whole new world.
A whole new world.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, that's exactly how I felt about it. I mean, it's a very college guy kind of atmosphere.
Yeah.
So there's gonna be, certainly I think, Vince, there'd be some people that would walk in there and would be somewhat uncomfortable.
Well,
just because of maybe some of the sorts of kind of humor or whatever, but also maybe people just off the street might be put off a little bit by everybody knows everybody's name,
Yeah.
But that's awesome.
Well,
But but there is, and I don't mean that it's like an elitist thing. Like anybody can walk in, but it's
really funny you say that because one of the customers we interviewed said something about him being the norm of the place. It's like Cheers in here.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really neat.
That's where I was going with that.
Oh yeah. Were you out there for that interview?
I was.
That's not the first store that's made the Cheers reference either.
Oh,
But
yeah.
it's the one that I think deserves it the most.
He said basically it's like the Cheers of comic book stores, and he was like the norm.
Yeah. During the interviews, we had one guy who wasn't even in the store. He just stepped up to since we were filming outside, he steps up to the door, and I mean, of course you guys know this, but Cap is inside. And he sees this gentleman's hair, he meaning Rob, the store owner, he sees his hair through the window, and he comes out and he's like, I know that hair! Never cut his hair before, apparently. And that guy shops regularly for the games, not the comic books. I mean, he's read some comics, but
That's
not
really
much.
funny.
So just by being a game customer, Rob runs out to say hi.
Yeah.
And that was really neat. It was really neat.
It's like a more adult version of Sesame Street.
Where everybody knows your name and you can go and get a drink.
You're in the front. There's all this camaraderie. There's this there's this kind of storefront atmosphere. It's like General Hooper store except with maybe some more profanity.
Well, it is a college town. I think he said UNI, right?
Yeah.
UNI College. Lots of college people walking down the street while we were in there, all over the place.
Like University of Northern Iowa, is that right?
I think so.
Okay. If it's not right, that's okay. Somebody can look it up.
Google it.
Google that, man.
I think that's the thing.
We already talked at length about the store layout. And, we've already talked at length about the community being such a through line to, and I think not just comic book stores, but to, not just to this movie, but to comic book stores in general. So it's kind of amazing to me that we're having this build where we're seeing people are welcome, and then we're a smaller town being which is a smaller town, but being Cedar Falls. People are rushing to see other people. They just because they care so much about the customers, they care so much about the store owners. People are just friends here.
Vince, don't you feel like we would have a somewhat different perspective on some of this if we simply done this in a different order?
Yeah, I think in some ways the natural layout of this trip is kind of the best thing that we could have asked for.
Yeah, which is amazing because it's completely random. Well, I mean, it's not random. We chose the order based on stuff. I mean, you know what I mean? We needed to go in a particular order just to logistically make the whole thing work. But it's kind of arbitrary.
Yeah, I mean,
because we didn't know these stores, we didn't know which one was going to be like what. I mean, starting at Krypton ultimately made a lot of sense. I mean, I'm mostly just talking about for our experience of okay, what are these stores going to be like? Because obviously Vince and I have been to tons and tons of comic book stores, but to start with, okay, here's a store that's bigger than we've been to before. Very often, it was kind of a fun kind of shock factor there, where it was like, oh man, this looks corporate. And then the next day to get a store that surprises us in a different kind of way. And then the next day we get a store that surprises us in an even different kind of way. And then yesterday we get a barber shop. There is this kind of build, but then also that community theme has been building in a way too. And I think that would have always been there, but there seems to be some sort of natural progression. I'm not putting my finger on it.
Here's the thing. We're traveling in the Midwest, and the Midwest has somewhat of a reputation for being really nice, especially the upper Midwest. As we go, we've seen not only these businesses shape their community or provide community, but these communities have shaped the businesses. And they kind of revolve around what's going on in their particular area. And they're really a part of that. The community is a part of them, and they are a part of the community. They're almost inseparable.
That's a terrific point. I mean, I find it, because essentially what we did was we just went in this big loop, because that's the only way they could have made the trip work. But and also on top of that, we've lucked out because some of these stores we found, or Kat found, just by Googling them and looking for them. But we lucked out because people like Eric Burnham, Ghostbusters writer, says, you need to go to this store, you need to go to this store. And so some of this has been fed to us, and completely by accident it's been shaping up very well for the potential theme.
So one thing leads to another.
I mean, some of it was, here are stores that I've heard of. Here are stores, a couple of them here are stores I've been to. Today we're going to Mayhem. I've been there. That's an amazing store. I can't wait for you guys to see it.
We even had a customer recommend that one to us.
It's going to be the only store we've been to that's 2 stories.
Oh yeah.
I know the one we did yesterday had a bottom part, but this place, it's not like underneath there's a game room. It's like there's more store under. It's a 2-story store.
Yeah.
So it's going to be it's not as big as the Source, but it's like a double-decker thing. So instead of all this square footage spread way back, there's something on top of something else.
Cool.
That's cool. I like stores, especially. I know it sounds weird to say.
Stores.
I like stores a lot. I like stores when they're double decker, but they're not huge. I don't know. I find that kind of fun. I remember back in the day, way back in the day, going to some store that had another level, and you could look down on the top level. And I don't know why that just it wasn't that huge, but it just made me feel like I was in a much more interesting place just by perspective.
Well, what's fun about it is you're looking around upstairs, and you get finished with that, and you go, cool, I'm only halfway down.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it is. That's a terrific point.
I've had that with a lot of flea markets, because I love looking around at flea markets.
Flea markets are so cool.
You're looking at all these different booths, and what's so great about flea markets, of course, is that it's all. We should do a documentary on flea markets. There's all these different dealers. And so it's like shopping at 30 or 40 or 50 different stores at the same time, because all of these different vendors have different things, and it's not one person stocking everything. It's all these different people collaborating, and I just love the feeling of you found a bunch of cool stuff and you're only halfway done.
Some of those people in those situations have a theme, and some don't. Some are very eclectic. You never know what you're going to find. Some you go specifically because they have that thing.
It's amazing what you find at some antique malls or flea markets. But, something I want to say here real quick, and then I can end. I don't have to linger on it. The idea that when you get to the end of the store, sometimes I don't realize there's an upper level, and that's an even better
That's
feeling.
when it's more fun, yeah.
Because I'm like, well, that was okay. And like, did you look upstairs? There's something upstairs!
That's like getting a 2-for-1 in a vending machine. It's the greatest thing in the world.
2 Doritos!
Just to make mention of a place that's exactly the case is the Mission Road Antique Mall over in Prairie Village. You go to the whole first level, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh my goodness, there's an upstairs.
That place huge.
Famous stables.
Real quick, I want to get back to the stores that we've been to. Vince, I kind of expected that there might be a little bit of all these stores are running together. That as we went along, we would have experiences at one, but not be able to remember exactly where it was. I was afraid there might be too much redundancy, because I kind of expected I know every comic book shop is different, and in the interviews I've been talking a lot with owners about how they lay out their new issues, and the big thing everybody keeps saying is, there's no one quintessential way to do that. Everybody has their own way and stuff, and these stores look different, but like, in my experience, comic book stores look more the same than they look different a lot of the time. A lot of the places that I've been to, and I mean, like, there's variation, but like, I really expected, okay, they've got a lot of the same product, and so I really kind of expected that they would start running together. But what we're finding is that the layouts, just for the stores we've been to, the layouts are all dramatically different sizes, dramatically differently put together, different buildings, way different kinds of buildings. But then also, sorry, this is one of my longer statements. No, you're cool. But anyway, but also, they don't have the same product. I mean, they are quite different. So I mean, I've been looking back on this trip, and like the first day was Krypton, and I vividly remember what that place looked like. And the next day was Acme, and the next day was The Source, and yesterday was Limited Edition. I had I'm having no problem separating those experiences.
I think to add a little to that, when you walk into when you walk into Krypton and you look around, it's a very bright, very open atmosphere, and you don't feel congested. But you walk into a place like Limited Edition, and you feel like you're walking into the store equivalent of a hot rod.
That's interesting.
So there are places that, like, this is retail. It's open. Feel free to look around, and then you walk into a place like Limited Edition, you're like, man, this is style.
And then Acme is like a mini labyrinth.
Yeah, which I think is kind of neat in its own way. I mean, considering that comic book characters are kind of the modern Grecian gods. I mean, they all have that perfect Grecian physique, and then you walk into a place that's just filled to the rafters like a labyrinth. It's kind of neat when you think of it in that way.
I mean, like you were talking about limited editions, like you could just pop up a chair somewhere and then you could just sit there all day. It's just so entertaining just to be in that store.
Yeah, I realize this isn't a very geeky movie, but the guys in Mighty Shop in the movie Coming to America, all those guys just sitting around shooting the breeze in a barber shop, and I feel like that's the perfect atmosphere. I mean, why does it always have to be about sports like boxing? Why does it always have to be about politics? You can sit around and you can talk about pop culture. Why not?
We could have taken a camera. Well, first of all, I'm going to say we could have done a whole movie on Limited Edition.
Yeah,
we could have done a whole movie on that store. We could have done a whole movie on The Source, but like Limited Edition, I think would have been the most entertaining store to make a movie about. Would have been a totally different thing than what we are doing.
Yeah,
but
it wouldn't have been a comic book thing. It would have been a comic book and thing.
I think you could walk in with a tripod, stick it in a place, put a camera up there, leave it going for 8 hours, and you'd have so much material that it would be hilarious. You could totally do that with that store.
Really interesting guy, really interesting staff, and really interesting customers. And I mean, Rob's not just an interesting guy by virtue of what he says, but his experiences. There were things that he shared with us off camera that we kind of went, wow, this would have made a much more interesting movie if you would have shared that on camera.
Yeah, there was some of that.
Granted, some of it wouldn't have been pertinent, so it would have been hard to fit in, but...
Oh, there's already some of that with a lot of these stories, right? Where I'm just like, ooh, I love that. I don't know where that's gonna go, but I love that. Yeah. No, I mean, like I said, the contrast so far has just been really kind of surprising to me. So far, we have not found a store that is closed off. We've not found a store that doesn't want people there. It kind of makes sense that the ones that agreed to talk to us are the ones that like people.
That's fair.
I think it would be fair to say that we may not have a fair sample set of what stores like what the majority of stores across the Midwest are like. I don't know, because obviously we're not going to enough of them. There are so many. We're doing 9, but it's it feels like it ought to be a good enough sample set. But if you think about it, we're going to the thing that limits it is, and this sounds funny, but the thing that limits it is we're going to stores that want to be in a documentary. Well, what kind of stores would those be like?
It might be different if we just showed up at stores and had no idea what we were getting into. We wouldn't do that, obviously, but
yeah, we wouldn't have a movie.
It'd be
but
it'd be a different story.
Yeah, exactly.
I kind of feel like the other foot's going to drop at some point because there is a stereotype about comic book stores for a reason.
Yeah.
Because it's not like these stores aren't plentiful; they're just not as big, well put together, or successful as some of these bigger stores that understand that what customer service is all about. So I think that sometimes people cater too much to the in crowd. Like limited edition, everyone's afraid. So people that go there regularly, they feel, or when they go in there, they're actually talking to their friends. But that's what makes that store so much different than the comic book guy from The Simpsons, you know.
And the thing is, I think it's important to note that guy still exists. He's out there somewhere, and there's a lot of them. And I don't. Maybe it's not appropriate to say. Maybe it's not accurate to say that there are a lot fewer of those than there used to be. But it would probably be accurate to say that some of these other stores have probably drawn more people away from those kind of people. And that those stores, I don't know how much we can credit them for this, but I think those sorts of stores have probably helped, at least to some degree, in helping the geek culture thing become more mainstream. These are becoming hangouts for people to go to, and they're just people. We're having all of these store owners saying we have more women shopping here than ever have before. Well, why is that? You know, it's because
atmosphere, right?
That's part of it, and it's sort of a chicken and the egg thing. It's like, what came first? It's like, did geek culture become mainstream enough for them to look for those stores and go there, and then they're going there, or was it an attitude shifted in the stores? But what caused that? So it's sort of a chicken and the egg thing.
I would almost say that, and I realize this is maybe a deeper conversation than we have time for in the documentary, but I would almost say that it makes sense that we get this geek culture more ingrained into mainstream culture, mainstream pop culture, and then they say, you know what, maybe this really is for me. These people have been telling me for years that I can't like superheroes, that I can't like comics, that I have to like Barbies in pink or something like that. Pink, the color, not the artist, but if you want, whatever. So then they get a hold of this, and they make comic books available through bookstores, but via trade paperbacks. And then they say, you know what, I do like comics. Maybe I'll venture into that comic book store. And say one of their first stores they go to is, let's say they go to Acme, or let's say they go to Limited Edition, where they say, please come in. This is our life. This is what we love, and we want you to love it with us. And then they say, you know what? I'm excited.
Yeah, and
I want to be part of this environment.
Yeah, and the lesson here is that the more you break those barriers, the more you break down those barriers, you break through those stereotypes, you are creating a need. Mm-hmm. And companies are going to come in and try to fill it, because that's it's just a supply and demand thing. It's that okay, there maybe at one time with comics didn't seem to be enough stuff for girls. Why? Because girls weren't reading comics. So was it a sexist thing? Maybe not entirely. Maybe a little bit, but certainly not entirely. It was, well, girls don't read comics, so if we put them out for them, they're not going to have. So what is the point of doing that? We can't sell our product, and how do we make a living? So if a lot of girls start reading comics and go, well, no, we like the superhero thing. We wish there was more for us, but we'll get started on it. So then maybe we can help to change the trends. And so I think what's important to note here is that it's not just the industry that changes trends, because I mean it's not just the people making it. The people consuming it have to change the trends, because they're the ones that are voting with their dollar. Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like this is why we get some people that kind of rise, like the cream rises. So we have people like Gail Simone and Joss Whedon, people who are capable of writing both strong female and male characters. So and I almost feel like
and just making characters in general seem like real people. That's all that matters.
Yeah, I almost feel like some of this stuff is starting to become not the way of the past necessarily, but less prevalent, where we'll have people that like women are less objectified in comics. Not that they're not, but I mean, if we're talking about like it's up to here from the floor, it's now kind of down to here.
I'll tell you, there are days.
We're lowering our standards.
No. we're changing what we find acceptable.
Yeah, because
there's more that is well, let's call it politically correct. There's more political correctness that's more acceptable, because we're not
exclusively trying to sell to that 20 or that 15 or 16-year-old crowd. Now let's say maybe considering the comic book readers generally get older, right? You can still say that?
Sure.
So comic book readers are generally getting older, so maybe some of us are getting more mature, thereby we're accepting more of what we expect. It doesn't have to be a sex symbol, it could be...
Well, and again, it's the market's ultimately got to start catering to that, because you don't want to cater too much. I'm talking to the owners about this. You don't want to cater too much to your existing readership. You want to try to bring new people in, because after all, how does medium survive if the new generations aren't also looking at it? But you got to strike some kind of a balance, because if the majority of people who want to buy comics are adults or at least have more adult minds and are more interested in more mature things, and I don't mean mature with a capital M, I mean mature as in it's not just people hitting each other, there's some substance to it. Well, then we've got to make that, because we're not going to sell our product. But Rob made a terrific point yesterday when he said that comics were never really excuse me, not never, but especially in the Marvel era, weren't really aimed at kids. They were aimed at kids, but they weren't. I mean, they were aimed at them, but they weren't written for them. When you listen to Stan Lee talk about the early stuff, he's trying to do superhero comics as novels. They were soap operas, and there are all kinds of themes that children would not understand. They were writing for themselves. Stan Lee was writing what he wanted to read. Well, he wasn't a kid. He was in his 50s.
You can be a 50-year-old kid, right?
He was in his 40s and 50s, so you see what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. I feel like maybe it's a good sign that there's so much press right now about sexism or the other kinds of discrimination within comics, because it means that there's a greater number of people looking at comics that want to get into it, and they're finding these subtle discriminations that have been there for years, and now they're moving towards the correction of that, which gets a greater readership, which helps keep these stores open.
Yeah, and I don't think we need to do anything to force that. I think it happens naturally.
Yeah, it's exactly the point there, is that it does happen naturally. We don't have to run out there with pitchforks and try to get people to do anything in particular. It's
no, and we don't need to preach political correctness. That stagnates creativity. What we need to do is see who wants to read comics and I want to say write things for them. What we really need to do is, as writers, write things for ourselves, and then there are people that are going to like those things. You know what I'm saying? That's what we ultimately really need to be doing. But I mean, like, the sexism, the racism, it's not going to fly, because there are lots of black people reading comics, there are lots of women reading comics, there are lots of Hispanic people reading comics. That stuff's not going to fly.
We had a customer the other day that said that she bought the issue of something where the two gay guys got married. I forget what it was. She said, this is a very big deal. I want to get this because this is entirely important. She said, good or bad, this is important to the medium to allow things like this to happen.
I think we're talking about X-Men there. I wasn't with you guys.
I know there was a Green Lantern issue. I just couldn't remember whether she talked about.
Did she say when New York legalized it?
Yes.
Yeah, well,
that's what it was.
That was a marriage thing, and then there was a Green Lantern character that was made gay for 52, but that wasn't a marriage thing. And then recently, thank you. And then recently, a couple of male characters in Archie started dating, but that's not a marriage thing because they're not old enough to do that. But anyway, all that stuff. I don't know. I don't, and this is just a personal opinion thing. I don't think that we need to like force existing writers that are already in the business to represent certain things or certain people. I think they should write what they know, and I think they should write what they want to write. And I think that if there are too many, if there were too many, I think that there's a place for everything. I think that if there are too many comics that are just catering toward men that want to see a lot of hot chicks, that tells us something. You see what I'm saying? It doesn't mean that those people should stop writing what they're writing. It means that we need new blood. That's all that means. Yeah. Get new people. So if we need representations of other things, then we need to be more diversifying in who is writing and who is drawing, not in what is being written or drawn.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
get a variety of styles, get a variety of different kinds of people writing. Not necessarily different, ethnic groups, but more just different styles.
Yeah,
that's the thing, is that it's more about the content than it is about the person writing.
Yes, because you're going to you're like I said earlier, you're going to stagnate creativity. You can't force me to write something I don't know well enough. You know what I mean? And that can be an editorial problem sometimes. We're seeing that some, in DC and stuff. I think, but you can't. I don't think it would be right if I have been writing for, say, Marvel for 10 years, and I was marginally successful, and people like the stuff I was writing. For somebody to come to me and say, and there's certain editorial mandates that make sense. Okay, I need you on this character. Tell a story. Okay, but give me a little bit of creative freedom. Don't tell me that. I have to write. This, I have to write a guy in Texas, because I've never been to Texas. Don't force me to do that. And I got to do all this research and stuff, and maybe I'm not interested in that. You know what I mean?
Maybe you don't get it.
Maybe you don't get it. And a really good way to perpetuate stereotypes is to force people that do not understand a part of culture to write that culture.
It's funny to me, I'm sorry. You're all right, man.
That's all right. That's bound to happen.
We're kind of in the way. Sorry. But I suppose maybe we're starting to get long-winded. Maybe we should wrap it up.
No, we'll wrap it up.
It's 9:07.
Yeah, we're good. But give us closing thought, Vince. It's cool.
I think that essentially the bottom line here is that people get into comics, and that helps support the story. That needs to happen because eventually, and it's a grim thought. Eventually, people start dying off. It's the way it is. You get old, you pass on. The stores will get handed down to somebody or sold to somebody, and but what happens when your readership goes away? Let's say it's a significant number of your readership. So you still have some, but is it enough to support your stores? And that's why comics need to evolve, not necessarily because we need some kind of moral compass, but rather that we need more people to come in and make it the creature that it deserves to be, and that's how we get that moral compass with it.
I also think that it is a tool that is instrumental in getting children interested in reading in the first place. I think it is the single best avenue for that, and we need to be using it for that, because that's a huge problem right now. Parents aren't helping their kids learn to read. They don't see the importance of it, and
that's also a thing we're finding
incredibly detrimental. And I'm hearing a lot of the school owners talking about that.
And we've heard a few customers even talk about that. Teachers saying that they use comics to try to get people to read, and it's amazing how many people. Apparently, according to one of the customers we saw, it's amazing how many people are graduating high school not knowing how to read. So
yeah,
how does that happen?
It's a good gateway, because it's like, okay, they're already watching movies, they're already watching cartoons, they like cute stuff, they like pictures, they like you know what I mean. So you throw some words in there, and it's, oh, that looks really fascinating, that looks like fun. Oh, I'm not gonna understand what's going on unless I read these words. Oh, okay, I guess I better figure out how to do that. So I don't know. I think that's gotta happen.
And if you're gonna use a gateway, why not use comics as opposed to, say, Stargate or weed?
I knew you were gonna say weed. I knew weed was gonna be in there.